going to show them. You have to see something. So I wouldn't disappear.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are very honored to have Patricia Birch with us. I believe this is the first time Cinema Ritrovato is hosting a choreographer. So I believe we have a lot to learn. But I'm also very pleased to have Peter Becker here with us. Peter, mother and son. So I'm sure you have noticed that so far I have handled only mother-son conversations. Margarete von Trotta and Felix Müller, and now Peter and Pat.
Watch out.
So, I'm not an expert on dancing. I love musicals, but there are certain questions that I would love Peter to ask. And we have already prepared some clips from Patricia's films and some musical numbers, loads of clips, in fact. And hopefully we're going to give you 10, 15 minutes towards the end of the session if you had any questions. So Pat doesn't need a reason to be here, but we are happy to have a very good reason as an extra, which is the screening of Greece. It's going to be a piazza screening, a favorite of many of us, on the last day, or rather the extra day of the festival. And most of the questions about Patricia's work is going to be directed towards that particular film. But is this your first time in Bologna?
First time here, yeah.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm honored to be here as Peter's mother, too. More honored by that than... I told you I'd embarrass you.
Do you? We have a classic question in Bologna. What was the first film you ever saw? Do you remember?
Movie I ever saw?
Yeah.
Probably the Shirley Temple or something. I don't know, 1,000 years ago.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time you danced?
First time I danced?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, very well. It was a wonderful dance recital. My older sister danced long before I did. She was 5 years older. I waited, I danced. She was in many recitals, and then came my moment to be in a recital. And I'd been so jealous for so long. And I remember being in the ladies' room, being very proud of myself. She was already out of the ladies' room. And I wanted to pose for a picture. And I sat on a dressing table that happened to be all glass. Guess what happened when I got off? It and I both shattered. That was my first memory of dancing in a recital. It was a broken table. But yes, I did the usual tap belly, what they called mildly interpretive, where I did a lot of big trees, a lot of that. I remember that very well.
And were you interested in musicals, like what, musicals on stage or films?
I was never that kind of a junkie about anything. Still I'm not.
But were you
I saw them.
Watching them as?
Sure,
yeah.
Sure.
Any particular film that inspired you, or you found, you know?
Oh, name me some early ones and I'll...
Like all the MGM ones, Singing in the Rain.
Fred Astaire.
Fred Astaire.
Fred Astaire. I worshipped, and still to this day, Fred Astaire. Judy Garland up to a point. Fred Astaire. That's it. Nobody can top him. Donald O'Connor, almost. Gene Kelly's wonderful, was wonderful, did some wonderful films, but there was something that didn't quite get to me the way he moved, the way Astaire did.
And how did you get into Broadway?
Me?
Yeah.
West Side Story. I was in Martha Graham's company, itching to get out, especially when she switched from doing story, what you call ballets or pieces or whatever they were, to the Greek stuff, which I just hated. And I was always in a costume where she was saying, Patsy, watch it, your behind is sticking out. Well, I got sick of that, and I got sick of the Greek things. And I think it was after, I have 3 children, all wonderful. And I think it was after one, and the company was going on tour, and I've forgotten which of my children, they might help me out, but they won't, was maybe 6 or 8 months old. And I said, I can't go for the whole thing. I really can't leave this child that long, or any of them, or both of them, or whatever it was. And so the company went without me, and I needed a job, and I wrote a note to Agnes DeMille saying, I'm here, and I know you know Martha Graham, and I know you've seen me in Deaths and Entrances and a couple of other things. And she said, come on along. So I did revivals for her, and that was the beginning of it all.
Right. And we get to Greece later, but your career in the movies started in the early 70s, I believe, and it was not in musical films. Is that correct? You did some other films?
I did some Merchant Ivory stuff,
right,
bits and pieces for them.
But in what sense? You were choreographing the non-musicals for Merchant
Yeah,
Ivory?
there were the bits and pieces of music in musicals, and I'd be, big was that.
Yes.
The piano.
Yeah.
It only took so much choreographing. There were only certain notes he could jump on, or they.
You also did Wild Party, right, which is a film about early Hollywood. Yeah.
Raquel Welch.
Yes.
Exhausting. Exhausting. I remember saying to her, I didn't come 3,000 miles for you to behave like this, because she was in makeup for 3.5 hours every day. How she stood it, I don't know. And I had heard, so my hobby, this is terrible to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. My hobby, because I'd heard, was to try to find the 27 places they'd done surgery. 27. Someone told me that. I think it was a lie. I checked the ankles. I checked everything I could see. They were wrong.
This year we are showing a couple of Ingmar Bergman films. You have turned one of his films, Smiles of a Midsummer Night, into a musical.
Smiles of a Summer's Night.
Yeah.
A Little Night Music with Harold Prince, yes. And there was a whole little section in front that I did of the leader singers, and there were bits and pieces all through the show, yes. And it was important to make it all move together and not become stick-out choreography.
Did you ever hear from Bergman? Any comments on
I wouldn't have heard. I was just a dance lady. I don't think they did either.
So
my husband, Peter's father, was important in getting us able to do that, because he was, of course, Janus Films, the inevitable, well-known Bill Becker.
Right. Now, I believe the stage production of Grease came first. Is that correct?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
7 years before they let anybody do the movie.
Yeah, and it was it ran for a very long time? Or?
9 years.
9 years.
We were a flop downtown. We opened to kind of semi-decent reviews, mostly on that side. And we were downtown sort of doing, and then I think it was an off-Broadway actors' strike. All I know is that they took the chance, we moved uptown, and became a hit for 9 years. Why, I don't know. Ask Adrienne Barbeau, she was there.
Did anyone film the stage production at any point? 9 years is a long time.
No, I think not. A, you're not allowed to unless you pay equity a fortune. The actors would be on you before you could turn around. And I don't, there may have been one guy who had a movie camera in his hat, Robert something or other, but I've never seen it, and I don't think I have it. He probably did it, but no one knows about it. And the library was not doing it yet. It took, the next year or the year after, they started to make archival films of things being done, but not yet.
Peter, I believe you have a clip for us,
Well,
right?
I do. Grease was never filmed. It ran for 9 years on Broadway. I've been in touch with the producers of the original stage show, and it was never filmed in all the 9 years because the unions wouldn't allow it.
Have you talked to them lately?
Yes. I wrote to Ken Wasteman, the producer, who brought the show from Chicago to New York, and he told me that over here, the next show that they did together, that Mom also choreographed, was actually shot, and there exists a bad black and white VHS that was shot from one camera in the back of the room. But Grease was never shown, was never filmed. But there is
I'm
one,
interrupting you for a second.
Yes.
Because Grease in Chicago was in a basement. It wasn't the Grease anybody ever knew about.
Well, tell us about the Chicago production.
All I know is that there was a tiny thing called Grease, which I gather was very rough and tough, and referred to a high school on the wrong side of Chicago. I remember Ken and Maxine telling me this. Rizzo was so tough, she wore a church key and would slash people with it if she didn't like them. Yeah, nice.
The church key is a word
Church
for
key is what you open a can with.
a can opener.
A bottle opener.
Bottle.
And so what came to New York was much tougher and greasier. And then I think maybe there was one in between when we did it in New York. We were considered lightweight. And then, of course, the writers hated the movie because of the palm trees and all. It became suburban to them. Go ahead. I'm sorry,
Well,
Peter.
so the show had started out in Chicago. Jim Jacobs and Warren Casey were the writers, and they had made this very small show that was discovered by these producers, Ken Wasteman and Maxine Fox, and they brought Pat on really right at the beginning, and it was never filmed. But what does survive is actually a television commercial for the stage show. And it's really interesting to me because in it I really feel like I see the DNA of what would become the movie, the way that
True.
Everything that you'll see in the film of Grease, you can actually see in this stage production. The spirit really survives through. So if we can we show that first clip, the commercial clip?
I think it was the second cast.
It's kind of all right there for me. Revisiting this film, I should say I have a kind of a double vision right now because I was 12 years old when the film was being shot. I was there for some of the shooting, but I saw the stage show must be 50 times.
That's right.
And and countless rehearsals. And for me, what makes the film, the energy of the film, really is what came from the stage show. And I think you can feel it in that clip. And I think a lot of what I really appreciate now, using slightly more experienced eyes to look at the film and then look back and do a little research, is how much, for me, the spirit of the film really comes from the movement. And if you look at that choreography, and this is something I wanted to sort of ask you about, it's not about steps. It's about motion, it's about movement, it's about something other than just steps.
No, absolutely. It's about what I call timed behavior. Because actually in the original cast, and we recall the Dancing musical on Broadway, I think that was one of the ads, and it danced all night long with people who moved well, or basically actors who could move well. I don't think there was a really trained dancer in the lot. And I prefer working with actors because it's about relationships and behavior. And I think you'll find out that the best dancers are ones that can act as well, and that's very few because they concentrate on steps. And also, I think, for me, the secret of Grease is about the relationships between the kids in high school. And we've all been there. And I think if you went back to your class in high school, you'd find a Rizzo, you'd find a Danny, you'd find a Kanicki. There's somebody in that class for everybody. And the girl that goes out with the people that work in the local nightclub, Marty, there's always somebody in that cast because that's how they did it originally. And for me, that's the secret of Greece. So the idea was to cast actors who could move well enough, and some even better than that. And it was my job to keep it both musical and choreographic, and keep that spirit of reality, which is, I think, what sold both the show and the movie, was that. Because there are plenty of good dance movies that don't get a big audience. And that's because people don't believe them. They watch it once and that's that. People went back to Greece because they saw themselves and their friends. And I think that's the secret.
Well, so, I mean, I think one of the things that you've become known for is making non-dancers look good moving.
Well, that's what I was just saying.
Yeah.
The non-dancers have a way of moving. If you can pick up on it, it's wonderful. I remember Timmy Myers, who played Kaniki, didn't want to move at all. He just wanted to walk around. And I finally said, what about the Mick Jagger strut? He said, oh, you mean this? That's what he used to do. I said, yeah, just do that. He loved doing it. It became his signature, and it was fine.
So, you know, when you moved from the stage to the bigger canvas of the movie screen, I think one of the things that separates the movie is suddenly this whole subsidiary cast exists. And for me, I think one of the secrets to unlocking the success of Grease is to know about the way that you populated the high school with dancers. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, the famous D1 through 20?
Sure, D1 through 20.
Peter remembers this D1. I needed people who could really dance, as well as this huge high school bunch of background and semi-background and everything. And I used to label numbers Paramount for the show-off numbers. I think Grease Lightning became that in the movie. Semi-Paramount, which in a way was Summer Nights. It stayed in script, but was a bit show-offy. Or things like There are Worse Things I Can Do, which were simply internal numbers. So D1 through 20 were 20 dancers, real dancers, who were able to give up the look of dancers and be part of the high school. And then I would look for actors who could match into that. There were about 3 levels working there together. And D1 through 20 became captains of 20 others. And we worked it out so that everybody felt like they were part of the same school and part of the same kind of dancing and part of the same kind of evening, if it was a dance-off or something.
Okay, I have 2 little clips that I wouldn't mind showing if we have time.
Yeah, please.
So D1 through 20, you'll see them all through the film in all the dance numbers. They're generally around the principals. They get worked in with the principals in the numbers. But what you might not notice is that they're also in the science classroom. They're in the hallways of the school.
Oh, yeah, they're through it. They went to the school.
They are the students at the school. So I have 2 little clips that are just pure D1 through 20 moments, but they have nothing to do with actual dance choreography. But if we can play clip number 4, intro D1 through 20.
Which is it?
You'll see. It's just a little bit of business in a hallway, but this is all,
That, yeah.
it's all dancers. It's as the most choreographed high school you've ever seen.
Yeah, I used to do the crowd scenes.
Right, you did all the background action on
I
this.
did all the background action because the director didn't want to. And that kind of action in the hallway. Hallways were my specialty. Bad behavior in hallways could get you famous.
Let me give you another example of where D1 through 20 is handy, and it's later in the film, in the drive-in sequence, but it's really maybe one of my favorite shots in the whole movie. And it's perfectly timed, and it's a moment from the drive-in. It's clip number 6.
Oh, it's one.
6, Lady with a Baby.
They're spreading the word that they think she's pregnant.
I have a question. I I think it was in one of your 1970s interviews that you mentioned a documentary feeling of Greece. What did you mean by that?
The reality of the behavior.
Not
stagey.
Not
I tried
stagey.
very hard to keep it as if it was just happening, so it would be a documentary drama.
Right. And did you watch any of those 50s rock and roll musicals of Jailhouse Rock and even non-music?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Anything coming from...
No
from that?
homage,
No. Okay. So...
But in a way, Ehsan,
except for the language. I mean, there were certain steps people were doing then. We used that stuff and elaborated on it. And the behavior, you know.
I mean, in a way, I think when you talk about those 50s rock musicals and stuff, or any of the movie musicals, one of the things that that people push against is this idea that suddenly people are dancing, right? And so, in a way, a lot of those movie musicals, I think, are sort of antithetical to what happens in Greece, where the music really emerges out of the scenes.
Right.
So, you know, for me, again, I think maybe one of my favorite numbers in Greece is Summer Nights.
Oh, I think it's the best. I think it's the best number in the movie.
Okay.
In Summer Nights.
Well, it's been said.
And
But, and to me, what I love about it is also the way it emerges from the scene and returns to the scene. It's a very natural progression, and even though I think you would call it a semi-paramount number, right?
well, it grows from being right in the script to a little bigger to a little bigger. So it grows from the reality of the situation where some kids are talking about something, and it gets more intense and more, and as it gets very intense, it begins to get bigger, and other people overhear, and you get a number.
Would
and you hope
I mean,
nobody noticed how I got there.
Play that
You want to
scene?
see it?
Yeah, let's play it.
So, you know, I think when you do Summer Nights, one of the things that I think I like to watch is that everybody has something to do, and it's not dancing. It's something to do. They're taking their trays to the trash, or there's always something to do. So if we could show Summer Nights, which is my clip number 7, and if you want, you can talk us through, Pat, a little bit.
I will, but there's something about this something to do thing that I learned very, very early from the High Priestess Martha Graham, who I remember saying you cannot walk or appear on the stage without a reason. Now, that may not be a talking reason. It may be you want to see something. It may be that you just need to get to the other side of the stage, or it may be whatever it is. There has to be something in your head that makes you have to walk into that space. And I think that has been my go-to thing when I forget what I'm doing. And sometimes, especially when you're choreographing, you get going and you're just choreographing up the wazoo, and suddenly you don't know where you are. You don't know where you are because you don't know where you came from or why you're there. And that whole thing about knowing why you're there and having a job to do, even in the middle of a number, even if it's 10 people doing high kicks, they're doing it for a reason. Maybe they're doing it to get attention. Maybe they're doing it to let off energy, but there is something behind it always.
Well, so if we play Summer Nights, clip number 7, it's also a great showcase for feathering D1 through 20 into a scene and then into a number that just emerges naturally, I think.
They're actors, D1 through 20, dancers who are actors.
So, Peter?
Well, you know, I wish we had longer, because I would love to go into everything about the prom and then the massive number at the end of the film. But Ehsan has another
Yes,
little.
this is a clip because you directed the sequel to the film, didn't you?
Uh-huh.
Yes. So it's very interesting taking over the full responsibility for the film. The whole production was yours, and there's a number that I really love. If you don't mind, I would love to play it.
I don't know what it is, but fine.
Okay, let's go. Can we play Grease 2, please?
What number is this?
It's the bowling number.
The what?
The bowling number.
Bowling.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is my favorite too.
Oh.
I think it's one of the better things I've managed to shove onto the screen. But it was original. It did not come from a stage thing. It was all in that environment, except we practiced it in the gym for a couple weeks, pretending. They weren't so good once they got the real bowling balls, I can tell you. It was a mess. They kept dropping them. But it came out okay. And it also talked about relationships. Watch Lorna Luft. She's hysterical in this. One of the things I would like to mention is that when you need a number, which is what I refer to, as I did before, a paramount number, that is a lot of show-off and has almost a proscenium feel now and then, and is asking for a big applause at the end, even though you don't applaud in movies, you have to split the difference between the character development and the show-off moments. And you could see when I got to instrumentals, I went for big-time show-off, and then had to clamber sort of back in to the relationships that I hoped I hadn't lost, with everybody doing kind of all together, you know, what word am I looking for? When you work all together, in unison dancing, which isn't what it's really about. But you have to kind of split the difference, please the audience. There's nothing like a kick line. And I'm telling you, after 16 kicks, I don't care what the show, what the movie, what the anything, the applause comes in. The kick line in front, 15th kick, 16, it starts, if they're all together and looking good. And you can see it at Radio City or wherever the hell it is, or where it was at Radio City. And now they don't do it so much, but that's what Rockettes are all about. I think people love to see the world somewhat in unison. We all would like that. And it's the unison thing that really gets to them, that all these disparate people are together doing the same thing at the same time, the same way. It gets them every time. Gets me too.
So just to make it official, my sister Allison, who was Rhonda Ritter in that number, is sitting right there. You can take a little bow. I can't leave Well Enough alone, because in some ways the thing that is most astonishing to me in Greece, because it feels like the culmination of everything, and it also feels like where we started this whole conversation with that television ad, is the number at the end of the film. Not "You're the One That I Want," but "We Go Together." "You're the One That I Want" is a great number, and I love how it came together, in this carnival apparatus. But there's something really majestic about the number of people that are moving around in "We Go Together." And so before we open up to questions, I just wanted a chance to show it, because I think it's something really, it does so many things that you've already talked about. There's behavior all the way through it, but then there are these very satisfying little moments of unison that come in, and as soon as the unison kicks in, you feel this sense of kind of lovely relief, and you get to enjoy it, and then all of a sudden it goes back out into this kind of crazy chaos. The foreground and the background are full of action. And after the clip, I just want you to explain a little bit about how you went about getting this many people to look like they're each doing what they want to do, and yet it's all somehow organized chaos.
Scotch tape.
So if we can play that last clip, "We Go Together."
Let me say something. Part of the reason it works so well is because of the duet right before it, the one that we're not showing.
Because we're so focused on the duet.
We're so focused on the duet, and suddenly it opens up.
Okay.
You have to, if I had a big number right before this, you have to make sure you know what you're doing. And I think that number came in late.
Which? Oh, You're the One That I Want.
You're the One That I Want.
Well, it didn't exist in the stage show.
No, and I think I asked for it during shooting because we needed something to tie those two together before we ended, and I didn't have it. And the end came without a real get-together for them. And I remember saying, I need this. And we got it.
So this is just after You're the One That I Want. It's literally, I think, 2 lines of dialogue later, and then there's this moment.
And you'll see how we got D1 through 20 and everybody in. It's kind of crazy.
Okay, so let's play clip 15. We go together.
Remember, high school relationships, that's what it's all about.
Two 200 people in that number. And
About.
Another case where D1 through 20 plays an instrumental role, because if you want, just talk about how you moved all those people around.
Well, there were 10 couples, and we had, I would guess, close to 200 people. And they were on all of those rides, kind of spread around or somewhere. It was so hot that they were hiding under tent flaps. I had to get them back out to do the number. It was very, very hot. And so I took each couple in what Peter referred to as D1 through 20, and they each took care of 30 people and rehearsed them and had them ready to shoot when the time came. And then I had to kind of choreograph when they came in and exactly what they were doing in terms of each other and make traffic.
And the whole field is choreographed the whole time, so...
Always, always. Even the extras, or background as we call them now, it was all choreographed. It was all staged. And D1 through 20, and I had 2 assistants, they helped too.
So one cinephile factoid before we go to, I think Ehsan wants to make sure we have a little bit of time for a question or two, but a cinephile factoid was that on that day, when that number was or on those days in that hot field, the whole thing had been rehearsed, and they had 2 very esteemed cinematic visitors to the set.
Oh, yeah.
You remember who they were?
John Schlesinger being one.
And the other was George Cukor.
That's right.
A little tiny detail, but they performed it without cameras rolling, just for
them.
So.
Because I had it, I didn't have to stop. We were able to shoot a master.
Amazing.
Yeah. Which we shot a master and then went after it. A master being the whole picture at once, all the way through. Not easy, but we figured it out. I hadn't done that much of it. That and the prom were not so easy. I divided the prom into 4 sections of a room. So after the master shot from above, I'd have to go to each quarter of the room and get that action. And that's why in the prom, I did stuff like the stroll and other stuff like that, so the conversations could be had without having to jump from place to place to place. But they would come down the line, and the people that had the lines were organically arranged, I hoped, and they were. So they came down the line when their lines should be spoken. I don't know who taught me that. I think I figured it out one rainy afternoon.
So, any questions? There's one front row here.
Could you comment on your collaboration with director Randall Kleiser? Did you storyboard any of the musical numbers, or what was that working relationship like?
Not on paper. We just talked them through, and I said, this is what I want to do, Randall. And we worked together, but not on paper.
What about your...
Maybe a couple of pictures here and there, but not just for the cinematographer, who was brilliant and has just finished with Jaws and then us. You like that, from Jaws to Grease. He knew. He watched rehearsals. Because of his watching rehearsals and our talking through all the time, it was storyboarded already in his head and ours.
In Bill Butler's head?
You bet, Bill Butler. Yeah. Wonderful cinematographer.
More questions?
No.
I can ask one. I have a question about working with art directors and production designers, because especially in Greece too, many of the numbers are choreographed in such a way that you need a very specific space. And so it was you who dictated to the AD or PD what kind of a space is needed for your dancers to move around.
Yeah, we had the front of the front of the high school was very important in Greece too. All the arrival, the whole thing. I mean, I think it was 8 minutes or so of arrival that I did, or longer. And then we had a gas station. What else did we have? We had classrooms up the wazoo. Didn't we have a chem lab? Everything exploded. You say what you want, and you look at pictures together, and you wander around together inside the high school, which we did too.
So it's really, I think in some ways, less a matter of defining the space for the dance to occur in, but shaping the dance for the space.
Oh, the dance has to go with the space. There's no way that I would do it the other way. I mean, yes, for a certain kind of movie, yes, if it's a big old, what I referred to before as a Paramount movie where it's show off with showgirls and beach balls, but that's different. Then they fix the space for you. But if it's in the middle of a chemistry class, you can't change the space.
I think another good example of this is in You're the One That I Want. The basic idea of that number had been staged, but it's my understanding that it actually never really came together as the number that we saw until you got to the fairground and found that apparatus.
Yeah, I can't remember how we found the Shake Shack, but it was pretty late. Pretty late. I'm not sure we had it right away. I had choreographed a little something, and we needed something like that, and we found it, or they found it for me. You have mistakes like that along the way, and they work sometimes.
Do you want to add something, Peter? We have two minutes left.
Well, if there's any other questions, we can...
No.
No, I think it's fine. Does anybody want to learn to hand jive?
The actors were all terrific. No problems.
Okay.
Hand jive came from a real dance.
Do you want to actually see an archival clip of an old hand jive, and then as you leave, we can play the rest of the hand jive and let you out? We'll hand jive you out of the theater. Okay, I have an archival clip of a 1958 hand jive, and it is.
And here it is.
terrible quality, but this is clip number 12. It's about 50 seconds long, and then if you want, right after it, you can just play clip number 13.
Do a little of our hand jive.
Okay, clips 12 and 13.
Thank you so much, Pat.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
Thanks
Peter.
for coming out, everybody.
Have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for coming, everybody. Okay, fine. Okay.